Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Hi, this is Mike Kotzian of Kivnon, and you're listening to the New Warehouse Podcast. Today's safety tip is about automated guided vehicles. And although they're built and designed to be inherently safe, I would recommend everybody treat them as if they're not, as if they were a forklift, not an automated forklift. As if there was a guy driving a tugger, you wouldn't test it. So if you see an automated guided vehicle that's a tugger, treat it the same. Keep your distance, keep your whereabouts of where you are, and just try to be safe around them, just like you would if it was not automated.
With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I am going to be joined by Mike Kotzian, and he is the Managing Director for the USA for Kivnon. And Kivnon is providing solutions for the automated guided vehicle and AMR parts of our automation and robotics side of the warehouse. So they are creating solutions for different companies to fit into their processes and help them to automate and bring robotics into their world. So I'm going to welcome Mike to the show, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about Kivnon, and we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the evolution in automation that he's seen over his career and kind of some of the trends that are going on now and how companies are keeping up with that, and specifically Kivnon. So Mike, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Kevin. Really appreciate it. So yeah, just a little background about myself first. So sure. As you mentioned, I've got kind of an inherent sort of interest in the history of AGVs and the evolution of AGVs because, you know, a lot of people don't know, but AGVs have been around for quite a while now. And, you know, I've been doing AGVs for over 23 years. So
wow.
Always kind of looking towards the future a little bit too, always, you know, because I've seen what's happened, you know, and trying to look for the development. But, you know, it's interesting to kind of look back at the history and see where we've come. So
yeah, definitely. So I'm curious before you continue to the 23 years, you know, and working with AGVs. I mean, obviously, you know, 23 years ago, AGVs were not or AMRs and things of that nature were not as widespread as they are now. So how did you kind of get that interest and start to work with these things?
Yeah, so you know, I've got a mechanical engineering degree from Lawrence Tech here up in Michigan, in Southfield, Michigan, and you know, had some exposure to robotics and things through school, and then started working as an intern for a company that had AGVs. Okay. And one of the first things I did was disassemble AGVs that were from like 1990. So this is probably like 1998. And like one of my jobs was these decommissioned AGVs that were in a General Motors transmission plant. And we were kind of salvaging them a little bit, you know, different parts off of them, drive motors and, you know, parts and things. So that was like 1990, 91 or something was when those AGVs were built. So that was my first kind of foray into AGVs. Yeah. So, I mean, we're going back 30 years now, right? And it's been crazy I'm an AGV guy, right? You know, that's all I've done for roughly 23 years is AGVs. So, I'm super interested in the different companies that have come and gone, some of the history. There's people I've worked with over the years that really date back and have worked at some of the names that you don't hear anymore, like Concatellas and different ones. Some of these guys that I've worked with. So I'm always asking them, what was it like, and what were the hurdles and stuff. And it's really interesting to kind of to delve into the history, because the idea of an AGV still, it's not that much different from the beginning of you're trying to move material automatically from point A to point B, let's say. Now, it can get super complex if you want it to, but I mean, if you're guiding by wire, you're guiding by laser, you're still moving some material, right? You have a need and you're trying to solve it. So I still think it's interesting to kind of to look back at, Arthur Mac Barrett invented the AGV in 1954, the Guide-O-Matic, right? So Barrett Electronics, made this wire-guided AGV. And I always kind of wondered, what was it like back then? What was the work environment like for the people that were working around it? What did they think when they first saw an AGV rolling down the line?
Wow.
So it's interesting to me.
Yeah, very interesting. And I actually didn't know that about the 1954. That's when the first AGV came out, and it's pretty interesting. And we kind of mentioned there about evolution and things of that nature. And so in the 23 years that you've been working with AGVs and automation world and things of that nature, what are like some of the big revolutionary steps that you've kind of seen throughout that time?
Yeah, and so one of the biggest ones is that when we talk about safety it's kind of the bumpers, right? So like when I started, like those first AGVs I was taking apart, even in the early 90s, a lot of AGVs had mechanical bumpers, whether it be a piece of plexiglass with, sensors that, it ran into and had a little give to it, or there was tape switch bumpers. They're kind of like foam bumpers that would physically run into you to be able to turn off, right? And, those days are long gone, but I mean, in 1998, 2000, they were still around, right? So now almost every AGV you'll find AGC, AMR, doesn't matter, if they're big, giant forklift AGVs or small little AMRs, they're going to have laser sensors on them, right? For safety. And I mean, that really was a big advancement. And I think, the perception of the workers and operators of being around them, I think that, it went a long way for people, looking to adapt, AGVs into their systems and feel more comfortable about it, right? So that's one of the biggest ones. Obviously, the navigation too, right? So if you go back to a wire in the floor, a buried wire, I mean, that goes back quite a ways. I mean, a lot through the 70s and 80s, there was magnetic pucks, grids, there was a lot of companies that had, every 10 feet kind of a square of little magnet pucks. And that technology still exists. I mean, it's a proven really old technology, but, more and more you're seeing AGVs being guided by lasers or SLAM or, vision cameras and things like that. So, that infrastructure free type, navigation has also been a real big innovation over the years.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think both things, when we think about it, and, obviously, I mentioned in there, I had no idea about, AGVs were around in 1954. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, obviously I was not around in 1954 either. So I wouldn't have seen it. But, I think recently, almost even like just in probably like the last 5 years or so, I mean, you've really kind of seen this market explode for these types of things, and people really kind of getting into them. And, even now I think, people are saying like, we need them, not just like people are thinking that like, oh, this might be good, or, this is something future looking for us. Like it's like a necessity. So, I mean, at what point, and what do you think might have really been kind of that catalyst to make this shift in the industry, where a lot of people were thinking like, this is like, future for us, to now where it's like, okay, this is now like, we need this.
Yeah. And I mean, like when I started, my career, there was, a lot of pushback against AGVs in terms of taking jobs, right? Especially like senior level people that were driving forklifts and things like that. And tugger driver, that was sort of a job that you sort of grew into, right? So, to be honest, there was, sort of an older age of workers that were having those jobs, right? Those were people in their 50s and 60s and things. And that was like sort of a seniority level type position to get. And, when AGVs were coming in, there was a lot of pushback of taking people's job, right? And like you said, nowadays, there's a few factors. And I mean, one is that population, the baby boomers, my parents' age type people, right? Those people are retiring, year by year here, and not taking those kind of senior level jobs of, like in the plan of being the forklift driver and things. So I think not just the need, but I just think the changing, what's sort of the culture of the people in, like, especially like a manufacturing space, of younger people that are more familiar or more comfortable with technology, sort of the baby boomer type, that age range of people kind of retiring and phasing out, right? That has played a part as well. And then now, pandemic, post-pandemic, whatever. I mean, it is a need. I mean, I think there was 11 million job openings in the U.S., last month, right? It's flat out, it's a need, right? Forget about the days of, it's going to take people's jobs. I mean, this is going to allow you to still be able to make your product, make your deliveries, assemble your automotive, vehicles, right? This is what you need. I mean, especially simpler things, right? Like, I think sometimes there's sort of I don't know. I think sometimes people try to make it too complicated. Of it's got to be some expensive, elaborate automated system, and it really doesn't. I mean, I think AGVs are an entry level a lot of times for companies that want to get into automation. I mean, it can be simple as A to B, right? And if you're delivering something from A to B on a daily basis, don't have to have an operator doing it, or a tugger driver or forklift driver or something doing it. It's just it allows them to do something else, number one. Two, if you don't have the people, it's sort of a non-factor. So that's kind of the way I feel the way it is now, right? So
it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I've certainly seen, I think, myself too, because I know, when I first got into like kind of the warehousing distribution industry, I was about, I guess, like 10, 11 years ago. And, being young at the time, like, 24 or 25, and, in tune with technology, thinking like, why is there not like more tech like involved here? Like, it seems like, we're missing something. And so it makes total sense what you're saying, like, as this generation, started to come into the workforce and being more comfortable with tech and starting to adopt those things more, and it being more of a normal thing, I guess. It makes total sense. So I'm curious, and I'm going to ask you a little bit of a tough question, because I think there's a lot of different schools of thought of something you brought up there around, like AGVs and robots and things taking people's jobs, right? And, there's some schools of thought where, obviously some of the workers, they think, like you mentioned, they're going to take away their jobs. But then there's like the school of thought, like, well, they're going to end up with a more meaningful job. It'll be a more elevated job. So, in those 23 years and, maybe prior to obviously what we're seeing now with the labor shortage and things where there's just not people to even take the jobs away from, essentially. Have you actually seen where, robots and AGVs have taken away jobs?
Yeah, I mean, so in the beginnings, especially in automotive, high wage rates for the big three, and there are people, that's how we would calculate an ROI, right? If a person, with fully loaded benefits was making 100,000 and we could, replace it in with a 2-year payback or something, right? That's what you did. But most of the time we were reassigning those people to more, not such labor intensive work, but more, like you said, more meaningful work, more, doing, tasks that the AGVs or the robots really weren't doing yet. Right. That really was more the case. There was the pushback to a certain extent, right? And I'll be honest. I saw in my early days of AGVs being physically damaged, on third shift to try to send a message or so to,
send the hit out,
not
right?
bring AGVs in. So, but I just think things have changed. I mean, I don't know. My kids. I got 3 kids, right? They're they're on tablets and things, and they're just used to technology. And I mean, I just think it's sort of assume that that's how it should be, right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I was curious about that because I certainly see now working in the warehousing industry too, and seeing how the automation and stuff is coming in to like kind of reduce a lot of these like mundane tasks that people, from my experience, like people that they don't even want to do now at this point. Like you find people to fill in this spot, and they only last like a couple of weeks because they're like, wow, I don't want to do that every day. Like, it's crazy. So you bring in automation to kind of take over those things, and then obviously you'll be able to move people, like you said, into more different types of roles that are more, I guess, unique in the task set and the skill set than like a robot can handle. So it's interesting to hear about that. So we kind of talked a little bit about the evolution of AGV and robotics automation, kind of as you've seen in your career and over time as well. But I'm curious, from your perspective, and obviously you've seen a lot happen in your career and with the technologies evolving, for right now, I mean, what do you think is the most exciting thing about, kind of automation or robotics in the material handling space?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah. So I can say that, like I mentioned, there's been a lot of innovation, right? And in terms of, when laser guided sensors were coming out, and you're using those for safety, or now, even for guidance and things. I mean, that was really, like brand new and really cool, right? And then, some of the different things like vision, and I mean, to be honest, there's like, you could make an AGV so complex that it's, sensing fork pockets and reading barcodes and sorting, the software aspect of it can make a, forget A to B. I mean, now you're talking maybe about a 20,000 location, warehouse with, a million SKUs or something, right? And you've got the AGV sorting things and all the software. So, I mean, that I feel like sort of where software can, artificial intelligence, decision making, things like that. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot more beyond like the simple sort of, let's say, mechanical, advances, like going from a mechanical bumper to a laser bumper.
Yeah.
It still functions basically the same, right? But it's, way better and stuff. But I think the software aspect is where you're really going to start to see, gains in productivity. You're going to see, you talk about like swarm technology and like the, being able to like make decisions, as production changes, right. Things like you're gonna start to see the AGVs actually do things that are really cool and advanced. And I mean, like predictive maintenance, right? Like the AGVs, like should know when to charge itself. Well, most AGVs now know when to go charge, right? That didn't used to be a thing. Now they know. They can tell you when it's time to, sort of do maintenance, right? Replace the batteries or do things like that, right? So I think once you really get into the software and the analytics of things and a lot of the data-driven stuff, that's where you're going to see some real productivity gains and things that are, really neat. So.
All right, interesting. And so, I mean, in that regard, do you think that I guess on the hardware side, I mean, do you think we're kind of like, I wouldn't say we've peaked in a sense, but we've kind of like hit a plateau on the hardware side. So now the software is really kind of like on the rise into what it can really make that hardware do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I hear you. Like we sort of peak. I mean, like a fork AGV is a fork AGV, right? Maybe it can go higher, maybe it can be narrower. These are all we maybe can go faster, right? I think speed is going to be another aspect, right? Because I mean, there has been difficulty in getting an ROI on certain things. AGVs inherently they move slower.
Yeah.
They move slower than a forklift driver. A lot of places will put safety measures in place and don't want you to go more than 5 miles per hour, things like that. But AGVs traditionally just haven't gone at those speeds, for safety reasons and things. So as like those sensors and things are evolving, AGVs are going to be able to go faster. So I think, but a fork AGV is still going to be a fork AGV. A tugger AGV is still going to tow. Like I said, maybe you could be the capacity. I mean, that's one of the things we at Kivnon, a lot of our units are maybe more categorized like an AGC, like an automated guided cart, but the capacity on them is fairly high. I mean, some units are up to 6,000 pounds.
Yeah.
So,
oh wow.
I mean, but yeah, I think the software, I think that's where, and I'm not a software guy. I have a mechanical engineering degree.
Yeah.
You're supposed to know your weaknesses. I'll tell you right now, my weakness is software. And I've worked with some really smart people over the years, that I've relied on and had to bring into a lot of meetings and stuff. And, software kind of gives you sort of an open end to where this could go,
All right, very interesting, and so we kind of talked about the landscape of there, and kind of the evolution and things. So you're working for Kivnon. I gave a little bit of an overview of Kivnon, but obviously I don't know it as well as you. So before we kind of dive a little more into what Kivnon's doing, why don't you kind of give us like a little brief overview of what it is you guys do?
Sure. So Kivnon, I mean, it's a family sort of privately owned company that grew really fast, based out of Barcelona, Spain. Right. And started as a different company. They were doing some mechanical and some tests and automation, and actually had a customer request to, get into, they integrated some AGVs and had a customer request to start, making their own AGV. So it's been about 11 years or so since they came out with the first units, and have really grown since then. I mean, 2019 was a record year. The company's now expanded into Germany and France and the UK, Mexico, Brazil. So, and I'm the managing director for the US, right? So I was employee number one here, basically tasked with setting up the office, right? I drew upon my 20 plus years experience, my contacts, and tried to model this over, some of the companies I've worked for in the past, right, of building up a project team and sort of putting a group together that I think that, we can be successful here in the US. And that's really what we're doing. So, I mean, we're pretty heavily, in manufacturing and automotive right now. I mean, we really are hoping to expand the portfolio. You'll see, I mean, if you check out our website, you'll see that we've launched 3 new vehicles last year, which kind of opens up the door a little bit more into some other industries. I think, food and beverage is going to be something that we're going to be in more often, once we get rolling here a little more. And we'll be in some non-durable manufacturing and probably some healthcare and some other industries besides just automotive. But, automotive is our bread and butter. I mean, the tier 1, tier 2s, really good with these sort of industrial vehicles that are, a lot of them are the mouse style or AGC. I say AGC because that's automated guided cart. Right. There's no governor of the AGV world. There's AGVs, there's LGVs, there's SGVs, there's driverless fork vehicles, there's AGCs, AMRs. There's a lot of crossover in some of them, but it's a lot of these times I call them they're smaller units. We're not lifting 3,000 pound pallets and things like that. We're most of the time we're pulling trolleys around, manufacturing and delivering parts to the line.
Okay. So. All right. Interesting stuff. So, and good to know there's no governor out there, so no one, the fact checkers. I feel like there should be, though. Fact checkers will come for us, right? So, all right. So, we heard a little bit about Kivnon, and one thing I noticed from doing some research about on the website and Kivnon and things is that you guys, you have like a base product line, and you mentioned the 3 vehicles that came out last year, but you do customization as well. And I think I saw one of your vehicles with what looked like universal robotic arm on top of it. So I'm curious, what have been like some of the most interesting customizations that you guys have done in your opinion?
Yeah, so Kivnon, I mean, there is maybe a couple of different units that they've done with a collaboration, with a robot company, right? And kind of merge the two, and you know, and that is sort of the holy grail that you hear about a lot, right? Is that let's say piece picking, each picking robot that's more.
Yeah.
I mean, you're basically at this point almost replacing a human, right? I mean, beyond driving a piece of equipment, a smaller mobile robot that actually can pick pieces or totes and things like that. I mean, that's sort of the holy grail in the warehousing distribution industry, right? Especially e-commerce and things. So there's been a ton of players out there that have tried to do it on their own, have collaborated, I mean, it's we'll see that. I mean, eventually there will be commercially released vehicles that will look like that, and people will be, comfortable around them. Some of them will be collaborative cobots, some of them won't be, but eventually we'll see that. I mean, the speed, the vision technology for the picking and things, all this stuff has to keep, evolving. So that's been pretty interesting, right? I mean, you're really combining, AGVs, that's what we do best, right? We know how to move material and things like that. So this is just a different way of moving, like a collaborative robot or something. Also done some kind of like a full, this is before my time, but I saw the unit. They did a full stainless steel AGV, for like a food industry type one. You could do full wash down and things like that, that, AGVs and water, I'll be honest, they don't mix, right?
They're not made for swimming, right?
They don't mix in general, our types of AGVs anyway. So that one's pretty unique. But I will say this, and I don't think this will be unique to Kivnon, because of that demand, right? Because that demand is there, and the companies that are adapting to this technology and, like you said, needing the technology now, I think we'll see less and less custom vehicles. There was a time 10, 15, 20 years ago where companies were, fighting for these orders, and they might be $10 million AGV companies that are, I'll do a custom AGV and then put it on my website and say it's standard, right? Because it's a big project and we're willing to do it. I know some of the previous companies that I worked at, or companies that I know and things like that, that custom AGV is probably kind of going away. I mean, it's just the demand is so much there for just the standard products. And I mean, I think companies really have kind of a, it's sort of a must for them to try to figure out what fits in that in markets, right? Like, I mean, the AGVs have some responsibility as well to not just say we won't do custom, but to try to make AGVs that are, that fit industries, right? Because I don't think you're going to see as many custom AGVs as there used to be. I mean, people aren't going to be doing pilots as much. That used to be a thing where we've been tasked with getting AGVs. I'm at a corporate level, and I want to do 2 AGV. People are much more willing now, and actually, like we talked, have the need to just do a system. Do a 10 vehicle or 20 vehicle system first. So that's kind of where I see it.
All right, very interesting. And, it's definitely interesting to get from your perspective. And, obviously you have a lot of experience with AGVs and more than probably a lot of other people as well that kind of just gotten into the industry recently. So it's really great to have you on, Mike. And, it's very interesting to hear about kind of all this evolution and all the different things. I mean, I learned a lot, certainly, especially the 1954 thing. That's still kind of like blowing my mind. But really interesting stuff, and interesting to hear about Kivnon as well. If people want to hear more information about Kivnon or find out more information about you guys, how can they do that?
Yeah, so Kivnon.com, KIVNON.com. We are going to be at Modex. So Modex, the big trade show that's in March in Atlanta, we will have a booth there. Really excited to kind of get back out there, over the last couple of years of trade shows. It's really looking forward to be back at Modex, so you'll see Kivnon there. You can see me on LinkedIn, Kivnon. You can also follow Kivnon USA on Twitter.
Okay, great. And I will definitely put all the information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. We will be at Modex as well doing podcasts from the floor, so we'll definitely come check you guys out, get some pictures and stuff so we can share with the listeners so they can see even further. definitely agree with you. Very excited to be back in person at Modex and not in some kind of digital virtual thing. I mean, actually see stuff in person. So it'd be great to connect there as well. So Mike, thank you once again for coming on the show and talking about AGVs and Kivnon today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.